My son called me, his voice as calm as can be, and said, "Dad, I'm getting married tomorrow. I've taken all the money from your accounts and sold the house. Goodbye." I was stunned. He had no idea about the house he sold, not really. Well, we'll get to that. For now, I'm just glad you're here with me. Please, hit that like button on this video, listen to my story all the way through, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. That's how I'll know how far my story has traveled. I spent 37 years patiently building my life, brick by painstaking brick. My name is Ernesto Morales, and at 62 years old, I thought I had weathered everything life could throw at me. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Houston, worked part-time at the municipal library, and cherished my peaceful routine. My son, Diego, was 34, and he had always been ambitious, perhaps too much so. His mother, Rosa, passed away when Diego was just 12. I raised him alone, working 2 jobs, sacrificing everything. I believed this sacrifice would at least guarantee his devotion. The first ominous sign appeared 3 months before everything imploded. Diego called me, asking for my bank account numbers. "Dad, I want to help you set up your automatic payments," he said, his voice as smooth as honey. "You're getting older. I don't want you to miss anything important." I hesitated. A knot formed in my stomach, but he was my son, my only son. I remembered the sleepless nights, the overtime hours, the birthdays we celebrated with cheap cake because money was tight. I thought, I have to trust him with something after all I've done for him, and I gave him the details. The second unsettling sign surfaced 6 weeks later. Diego came to visit with his fiancée, Brenda. She was 26, the kind of beautiful woman with a sharp, calculating allure that makes you uneasy, though you can't quite pinpoint why. They sat in my living room, and Brenda's eyes swept over everything, the furniture, the paintings, the antique clock on the mantelpiece. "This house must be worth quite a bit by now, Ernesto," she remarked, neither calling me Dad nor Señor Morales. "The real estate market here has really taken off." "It's my home," I replied simply. "I have no interest in selling it." Diego chuckled and squeezed her hand. "Of course not, Dad. Brenda's just making conversation." But something in her gaze twisted my insides. Then came the bank statements. Every Sunday morning I checked my accounts online over a cup of coffee. That Sunday, at the end of October, my heart stopped. My savings account, the one holding $17,000 accumulated over a decade of labor, my wife's insurance, years of foregoing vacations and new clothes, showed a balance of $200. My checking account was nearly empty, just $53. My hands trembled as I called the bank. The representative, a pleasant young woman named Lucia, reviewed my transaction history. "Señor Morales, these withdrawals were made through your online banking. The transfers went to an account set up in the name of Diego Morales. Is that your son?" I couldn't answer. I hung up without a word and sat in my kitchen, staring at the wall for 3 hours. How could he? Why would he do this? I'd given him everything, my youth, my opportunities, my relationships, and this was his repayment. The next morning, my phone rang. Diego. I almost answered, but something inside me made me pick up the receiver. "Hi, Dad. Good news. I'm getting married tomorrow. Brenda and I decided not to wait. We're having a beautiful ceremony at the Rio Clara Country Club." I felt my throat tighten. "Diego, my accounts." He actually laughed. "Yes, Dad, I took the money. I needed funds for the wedding and for our new start. Don't worry, you'll have plenty for your pension. And another thing, I sold the house. I had a power of attorney for the paperwork you signed last year. Remember? The deal closed yesterday. You have 30 days to move out." The world tilted. "You sold my house?" "I got a very good price. $40,000. That will be our down payment on an apartment in the city. I have to go, Dad. My wedding planner is calling. We'll talk after the honeymoon. Bye, Dad." The line went dead, and I was left sitting there, phone in hand, the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. Slowly, something else began to rise within me. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something colder, harder, that curved my lips into a smile. I started to laugh. First, a quiet chuckle, then louder and louder until tears streamed down my face. Diego had no idea what he had just done. That house he thought he'd sold, my supposedly modest suburban home, valued at $40,000, was the biggest mistake of his life, because the house Diego sold wasn't the one I actually lived in. The property sold was a rental property I had purchased 15 years prior, titled in my name for tax purposes, and which was occupied by tenants with a lease agreement still active for 18 months. My actual home, the one I was sitting in at that moment, mortgage-free and worth around $600,000, was held in a trust for my late wife's family, the Rosa and Morales Family Trust. Diego didn't even know the trust existed. Oh, my greedy, foolish son. What have you gotten yourself into? The laughter gradually subsided, leaving behind something harder, like ice in my bones. I sat at my kitchen table, in my real kitchen, and forced myself to think clearly about what I had truly lost. Selling the rental property would create a legal nightmare for him. When the buyers discover the tenants with an active lease, lawsuits will begin. The Hernandez family had lived there for 3 years, and they had 16 months left on their contract. Diego would face lawsuits from the buyers for fraud and quite possibly criminal charges for selling property he legally had no right to sell. That power of attorney he mentioned, I never signed any such thing. What hurt the most was the loss of my savings. Those $17,000 were my security, my freedom, my future medical care. That money was intended to ensure I would never be a burden to anyone. The cruel irony was that my own son had stolen it precisely to avoid bearing responsibility for me. But there was something fundamental Diego didn't understand. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't a confused old man ready to accept betrayal silently. Before working at the library, I had spent decades in law offices. I understood contracts, property, fraud, and, even better, I kept meticulous records of everything. I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out a folder labeled Rental Property Los Robles Street. Inside were copies of the lease with the Hernandez family, the security deposit receipt, and the deed in my name. I had never given Diego a power of attorney, so he couldn't claim he had one, or that it was forged or obtained through deception. Then I checked the property folder. My real home, the one I was sitting in at that moment, was titled in the name of the Rosa and Morales Family Trust. I was the trustee and beneficiary, but the property wasn't in my name as an individual. Diego had grown up in this house, but he never bothered to understand the legal structure that protected it. I brewed myself a coffee and began to make a list of what needed to be done. First, report the theft to the police. Second, contact the bank's fraud department. Third, hire a lawyer. Fourth, ensure the Hernandez family was protected and informed. Fifth, gather evidence of Diego's fraud in selling the property. As I wrote, my hand slowed. Did I truly want to send my son to prison? The thought made me sick. Despite everything, he was still the child I cradled, the teenager I helped with homework, the young man I was proud of when he graduated. Then I remembered his voice on the phone, cheerful, carefree. You'll have plenty for your pension. As if he had done nothing wrong. What kind of man had I raised? I thought of Brenda, with her calculating eyes and sharp remarks about the house's value. Was she the one who pushed him? Or was Diego always capable of such cruelty, and I simply didn't want to see it? My phone vibrated. A text message from my neighbor and friend. Ernesto, I saw a for sale sign on your rental property on De Los Robles yesterday, and it's gone today. Is everything okay? I replied, it's a long story. Coffee tomorrow. Patricia had been my friend for 15 years and had worked as a paralegal before retiring. I would need allies for what was to come. That night, I barely slept, picturing Diego's face when he realized what he had done. Would he repent, beg for forgiveness, or blame me, claiming I had deceived him? By dawn, I had a plan. I wouldn't go to the police immediately. First, I would gather every piece of evidence, document every crime, and build an irrefutable case. Then I would present Diego with a choice: full voluntary restitution or criminal prosecution. I would give him one, and only one chance to do the right thing. One, and only one. Chance to prove he was still my son, not the stranger who laughed while robbing me. Precisely at 9 o'clock that morning, I called the bank. "I want to report fraud and theft from my accounts," I said, "and I need a full statement of all transactions for the past 6 months." "Of course, Senor Morales, I'm very sorry about this. We will begin an immediate investigation," Lucia replied. Then I called Martin Garcia, a lawyer who frequented my book club. "Martin, I need your help. My son has taken my savings and fraudulently sold my property. I need legal representation, and everything must remain confidential until I decide to act." He was silent for a few seconds. "Ernesto, this is very serious. What is the amount involved?" $17,000 from my savings and about $40,000 from the fraudulent sale." "Good heavens, I'll help you. Come to my office." That afternoon, I hung up the phone and looked at myself in the hallway mirror. My silver hair was neatly combed. My eyes remained clear and firm. I looked like the typical kind grandfather from the neighborhood. But Diego had forgotten something. Kind grandfathers can also be warriors when necessary. He wanted to get married the next day. Fine. Let him enjoy his wedding. Let him think he had won. I would wait, gather my strength, and then show him what happens when you betray the man who gave you life. Martin's office was in an unassuming brick building downtown. We sat opposite each other, my folder of documents between us. He read through everything with growing disbelief, making notes periodically. "Ernesto, this is worse than I thought," he said, finally removing his glasses. "Your son forged documents to sell property that didn't belong to him. This isn't just civil fraud. It's a criminal offense. He could face 5 to 10 years in prison." "I know," I replied softly, "but I need to understand all my options before I decide how to proceed." "All right," he nodded. "First, we file a fraud report with your bank to freeze any further transactions. Then we notify the title company that handled the sale. They need to know the transaction was fraudulent. Then a report to the police. You can ask them to investigate before official charges are filed. That way, we have a little control over the timing. And the buyers of the house?" I asked. "Most likely, they will sue Diego for fraud when they discover the tenants. They might also sue the title company for not catching this. Either way, Diego will be responsible for the full purchase price and for damages." Martin looked at me seriously. "I have to ask, are you sure you want to go through with this? He's your son?" I met his gaze. He stole my life's savings and tried to put me on the street. What kind of son does that? We spent 2 hours preparing the paperwork. By the time I left Martin's office, we had filed fraud reports with both the bank and the title company. The police report was to be filed the following morning. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. "Dad, why is the bank calling me about a fraud investigation? What's going on?" Diego sounded annoyed. "The bank flagged the transfers from my accounts as suspicious," I replied, my voice calm. "It's standard procedure when large sums are moved. But I'm your son. Tell them it's fine." "It's not fine, Diego. You took $17,000 without my permission." His tone changed, becoming harder. "I had your permission. You gave me access to your accounts to help with emergencies, not to drain everything I have. This isn't help, it's theft." "It's not theft, it's a loan. Brenda and I will pay you back as soon as we're on our feet, and the house sale was perfectly legal. I had a power of attorney." "Diego, I never signed a power of attorney." Silence. "Yes, you did. Remember when you were in the hospital with pneumonia? I brought the papers to your room." I felt a chill run down my spine. I had indeed been hospitalized last year for 4 days with severe pneumonia. I barely remembered those days. The fever, the medication, the exhaustion. "I need to see those papers." "Dad, stop making this difficult. It's all legal. Call the bank and tell them to cancel the investigation. Please, the wedding is tomorrow. I don't want this stress." "You should have thought about that before you robbed your father." I hung up, not waiting for his reply. That evening, Patricia came over with wine and comfort. I told her everything and watched her face shift from shock to fury. "That scoundrel," she said. "I'll be your witness for the investigation, for anything." "Thank you," I replied, feeling the weight of true friendship. "Actually, I do need something. I want to speak with the Hernandez family. They need to know what's happening." "We called together," a worried Tomas Hernandez replied. "Senor Ernesto, is everything all right?" I carefully explained the situation. "So, your son sold the house we live in without telling you or us?" he asked, incredulity in his voice. "What will happen to our lease?" "Your lease remains valid," I assured him. "I'm working with my lawyer to sort everything out. You are protected, but I wanted to give you a heads up in case the buyers try to pressure you. God, thank you for warning us. Count on us for whatever you need. Testimony, a statement, anything." After we hung up, Patricia poured more wine. "Diego has no idea what's coming," she observed. "He thinks I'm a confused old man he can manipulate," I replied. The next morning, I received an email from the title company. My hands trembled as I read it. "Señor Morales, our investigation has revealed serious irregularities in the sale of the property located at 1247 De Los Robles Street. The power of attorney presented by Diego Morales appears to bear your signature. However, the notary's seal belongs to a notary whose license was expired on the date in question. Furthermore, the document is dated during your hospitalization, and our records show the notary was in another state that day. We consider this possible forgery and fraud. The sale proceeds have been frozen pending investigation. The buyers have been informed and are initiating legal action against Señor Morales." I forwarded the email to Martin with a single line. He forged it. This was the proof I needed. Diego hadn't just acted carelessly or immorally. He had committed calculated fraud. I pictured him entering my hospital room with papers I could barely see, possibly slipping me blank pages to sign so he could fill them in later and obtain forged notarizations. Then came another message from Diego. "Dad, we need to talk. Can you come to the wedding tomorrow, please? I want you there." I stared at the screen. He wanted me to attend a wedding paid for with my stolen money. I typed back, "I'll be there." Let him think everything is fine. Let him marry his calculating fiancée. Let him celebrate with my money. Let him continue to believe he got away with it. I would smile, pose for pictures, play the role of the proud father, and then, when he least expected it, I would show him the consequences of betraying the man who gave him life. The wedding turned out to be exactly as I had imagined, lavish, ostentatious, and utterly devoid of warmth. The Rio Clara Country Club gleamed with white roses and crystal chandeliers. I donned my best suit, a dark navy, elegant and understated, and arrived early. Brenda was stunning in a dress that surely cost thousands. My $10,000. Diego, in a tuxedo, beamed as if he had not a single care. Upon seeing me, he rushed over. "You really came, Dad?" He hugged me tightly. "I'm so glad you're here. I know things have been strange lately, but this is a new start for all of us." I looked at him pointedly. He genuinely believed that robbing me was merely strange. "Congratulations, Diego," I said, my voice neutral. "You look very happy." Brenda approached, her smile sharp. "Ernesto, how thoughtful of you to come. Diego was worried you'd still be angry about, well, the money in the house, but it's really for the best. You don't need such a big house anymore, and Diego and I can build our future." "How considerate," I replied, my tone amiable, my gaze icy. The ceremony was brief. I sat in the front row watching my son vow to love and cherish a woman who had helped him betray his own father. During the reception, I made polite conversation, sipped champagne I barely tasted, and smiled for photographs I would never want to see again. Just as they were cutting the cake, my phone vibrated. A message from Martin. "Police have opened an investigation. Fraud charges are being prepared. Proceeding." I glanced at Diego, laughing with his friends, completely oblivious. Not yet, I thought. Let him enjoy this last bit of joy. It will be his last for a long time. The confrontation came 3 days later. Diego and Brenda showed up at my door unannounced. He was furious. Brenda's face was tight, cold. Diego pushed the door open, not waiting for an invitation. "What the hell did you do?" he yelled. "The title company froze the sale money. They say the power of attorney is forged. They're threatening to sue me." I calmly closed the door. "Perhaps because it is forged," I replied. "You took advantage of me while I was sick to make me sign papers I didn't understand, and then you forged a notarization. That's a crime, Diego, and on top of that, you stole my life savings." Brenda stepped forward. This is ridiculous. Diego was just helping you. You're an old man, Ernesto. You can't manage your finances and your property anymore. We did everyone a favor. A favor, I echoed. Draining my accounts and selling a house you couldn't even sell. It's not theft if you're too senile to manage it, she spat out. Diego, your son, everything you have will go to him anyway. We just expedited the process a little. Understand? I said very calmly. So that was the plan. Find a man with a father who has money, manipulate him into robbing his father, and build your life on it. Don't you dare talk about Brenda like that, Diego protested. She loves me. She loves your inheritance, or what she perceives as your inheritance, I corrected. Brenda leaned in, her voice a chilling whisper. Are you going to withdraw these accusations? She said, a frosty smile playing on her lips. Or are we going to make your life unbearable? We'll say you have dementia. We'll have you declared incompetent. We'll put you in a nursing home. A cold dread washed over me. That's a threat. That's a promise, Diego said, his tone low and menacing. I'm trying to be reasonable. Just call the bank and the title company and tell them it was all with your authorization. That way we all continue with our lives. If not, we'll drown you in lawsuits for years. We have more than enough lawyers. We'll spend every last cent you have on their fees, and we'll tell everyone you've lost your mind. For a moment, fear gripped me. Not because of their threats. I had proof. It was because of the man my son had become. This furious, threatening stranger wearing his face was someone I didn't recognize, but I hadn't survived 37 years alone by being weak. Get out of my house, I said, my voice a steel I barely recognized. Both of you, immediately. Dad, get out. You have 5 seconds before I call the police. 1. I didn't wait for 2. They were gone. Brenda shrieked an insult at Diego, her face contorted with rage. Watching their car disappear down the drive, I sank onto the sofa, my hands trembling. The masks were gone. I knew exactly who I was dealing with. The next morning, I called Martin. File the official complaint. I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Are you sure? Absolutely. The following days were a welcome respite. I read, tended my garden, and dined with Patricia. I needed to regain my physical and emotional strength. The confrontation had shaken me more than I cared to admit. But as I watered my roses, feeling the sun warm my face, I noticed something new growing within me. A cold, unyielding resolve. Diego and Brenda had made their choice. Now they would live with the consequences. A week after the argument, Diego called again. His voice was different this time, softer, almost childlike, like when he wanted something as a boy. Dad, can we please talk? I almost hung up. Instead, I said, I'm listening. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what I did. I acted poorly, Dad. I know. I let Brendy get into my head, the stress of the wedding. It all piled up. But you're my father. I should never have... His voice broke. He sounded genuinely remorseful, or he was an excellent actor. Forgive me, Dad. We can fix this. The part of me that remembered carrying him in my arms, teaching him to ride his bicycle, applauding at his graduations, wanted to believe him, to forgive him immediately. But I had learned my lesson about blind trust. What exactly do you propose, Diego? I'll pay you back. All of it. Brendy and I will get a loan if we have to, and I'll sort out the house. I'll talk to the buyers. I'll sort it all out. He was speaking rapidly now, urgently. Just please stop the investigation. I can't have a criminal record, Dad. It will ruin my career, my whole life. You should have thought of that before committing fraud, I replied. I know, and I'm sorry, but give me a chance to make it right. Don't destroy my life over one mistake. One mistake? As if robbing your own father was akin to forgetting his birthday. How long will it take you to repay the money? I asked. Maybe 6 months, a year at the most. We need time to get the loan. You don't have 6 months, Diego. The investigation is already underway. He grew desperate. Then what do you want? Tell me what you want. I want full restitution within 30 days, I said. Every dollar you took, with interest. I want a written confession, and I want you to face the consequences of your actions. That's impossible. We can't get that much money in 30 days. Then you should have thought about that before stealing from me. You're cruel. You have no heart. I'm your son, your only son. How can you do this to me?" "And how could you do this to me?" I replied softly. I hung up and turned off my phone. Later that day, Brenda arrived alone. I saw her from the window, stepping out of a pristine car in a cream-colored suit. She rang the doorbell 3 times before I opened it. "Ernesto, we need to talk face-to-face," she said, her smile carefully crafted. "May I come in?" "No." She blinked in surprise. "I'm trying to make peace." "Make peace on the porch." Her jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. "Look, I know. You think I'm a gold digger manipulating your son, but I truly love Diego and I'm trying to save him from this disaster." "By convincing me to drop the charges," I said. "By convincing you to see reason," she corrected. "Don't you understand what a criminal record will do to his life, his career, our future?" "Yes," I replied. "That's precisely why we must see this through." Brenda stared at me, then let out a bitter laugh. "You know what? Diego was right about you. You're a selfish old man who can't stand to see him happy. You're so bitter and lonely, you'd rather see your own son ruined. When he's in prison, when your relationship is destroyed forever, you'll realize you chose money over your son. You'll die alone, and it will be your fault." "Goodbye, Brenda," I said, closing the door on her furious face. That evening, Patricia arrived with her husband, Miguel, and 2 other couples from the Himnos and Rivera book club. They brought food, wine, and something even more precious, support. "We heard everything," Patricia said, hugging me. "We wanted you to know you're not alone." We sat in the living room, and I told them everything, not just the facts, but the pain, the guilt, the fear that I was doing something unforgivable by suing my own son. They listened without judgment. "You're doing the right thing," Miguel said firmly. "What Diego did is a crime. If you let this slide, you're showing him that it's acceptable to betray anyone without consequences." Carolina nodded. "My brother stole from my mother. She forgave him, didn't press charges. 5 years later, he did it again. There are people who only learn when they face real consequences. Their words wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I wasn't being cruel or crazy. I was a man protecting himself from someone who had shown himself to be dangerous, even if that someone was his son." As they left, Patricia squeezed my hand. "Be strong, Ernesto. You're doing a difficult but the right thing." The next day, I called Martin. "No deals, no settlements. We go all the way." "Understood," he replied. "And if it means anything, I think you're incredibly brave." Brave or broken? I wasn't sure, but I knew there was no turning back. They came again, this time on a Sunday morning when the neighborhood was quiet. I saw them from the window, Diego and Brenda walking up the path to the house, a measured pace. Diego carried flowers, Brenda a box from the patisserie, peaceful offerings. I almost didn't open the door, but curiosity got the better of me. What new strategy did they bring? "Dad," Diego said, his voice soft, his eyes red-rimmed as if he'd been crying. "We asked for just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let them in. We sat in the living room, they on the sofa, me in my armchair, maintaining a distance. Diego placed the flowers on the coffee table. Daisies, my favorites. Of course, he remembered. "Dad, we were wrong," he began. "About everything. The way we spoke to you, what we did, it was unforgivable." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "The past few weeks I haven't slept, thinking about what I did, how much I hurt you. You're my father. You raised me alone, gave me everything, and I repaid you with betrayal." It was exactly what I had always wanted to hear, and that was precisely why it felt like a performance. Brenda spoke, her voice hushed. "Ernesto, I owe you an apology, too. I was terrible to you, said cruel things. The truth is, I was scared. My parents are poor. I grew up with nothing. When I met Diego, I saw an opportunity for a better life, and I overstepped. I pushed him to do things he shouldn't have." "Things you convinced him to do?" I asked. "Yes," she admitted, meeting my eyes. "The idea about the money, the house, that was my doing. Diego didn't want to. I pressured him, Told him you wouldn't notice, that you wanted to see him happy. I was wrong. Please forgive me. Diego took my hand. I didn't pull away. Dad, we want to make it right. We're willing to do whatever it takes. We've already taken out a second mortgage on the apartment. We can give you $100,000 in 2 weeks. The rest will take longer, but we'll pay you back everything with interest. Brenda added quickly, whatever you deem fair. And the criminal case? I asked. Diego's face fell. That's the problem, Dad. If I have a criminal record, I'll lose my job. I work in finance. I'll be fired. How will I pay you back? How will I support a family? I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I'm just asking for a chance to make amends without destroying my future. Please, Ernesto, Brenda added. We want children. Diego wants to give you grandchildren, but he can't do that from a prison cell. Grandchildren. The word hit me in the chest. I had always dreamed of holding Diego's children, telling them our family history. They knew exactly where to strike. Think carefully, Diego pressed. Do you really want your future grandchildren to visit their father in prison? Do you want them to grow up knowing their grandfather put their father there? I looked at them both. The performance was good. Diego's tears seemed genuine. Brenda's remorse sounded convincing. But I noticed the details. The way she stole glances at her watch, the tension in Diego's shoulders, his hand gripping mine too tightly when I didn't respond. And if I say no? I asked quietly. The shift was instantaneous. Diego's expression hardened. Brenda leaned back, crossing her arms. Then you'll choose to destroy your own son, Diego said coldly. And for what? For money you don't even need. You have your precious house, your comfortable life. You'll take everything from me out of pride. It's not pride, it's justice. Justice, Brenda scoffed. What about justice for us? Diego is your only son. Everything you have will eventually be his anyway. We're just expediting the process. So, you think it would have been ideal if I had died earlier so it would be more convenient for him? I countered. Don't twist my words, Brenda snapped. You're a spiteful old man who can't stand to see him happy. Diego didn't defend me, just watched, waiting to see if this approach worked better than tears. I slowly stood up. Get out of my house, Dad, get out! My voice trembled with rage. You come here with flowers and fake apologies, trying to manipulate me into letting you rob me without consequence. Do you really think I don't see what you're doing? Diego jumped up, his face flushed. You'll regret this when I'm sitting in a cell, when Brenda leaves me because I can't support her. When you spend every Christmas alone, remember this is what you chose. I didn't choose this, I said, my tone icy. You chose this the day you decided to rob your father. Brenda grabbed his arm. Come on, he's not worth it. Let him rot here alone with his money. They slammed the door, leaving. I remained in the living room, trembling not from fear, but from rage. They had tried everything. Apologies, manipulation, guilt, threats. They had even offered me grandchildren as a bargaining chip, as if I would trade my dignity for a few family photos. But beneath the rage was a cold thread of doubt. What if Diego was right? What if I was destroying him? What if, years from now, I would regret this? I didn't push those thoughts away. That day, I saw what lay beneath their masks. They regretted not that they had hurt me, but only that they had been caught. I threw the daisies in the trash and called Martin. They just came by trying to manipulate me into dropping the charges, I explained. Offered to pay back some of the money if we stopped everything. What did you tell them? To get out of my house. A pause, then Martin's warm chuckle. Good for you, Ernesto. That takes a lot of strength. Strength or stubbornness, I didn't know, but there was no turning back now. The day of the trial arrived 6 weeks later. Martin had prepared me for everything. The process, the questions, the possibility of Diego taking a plea deal. But he, stubbornly, delusionally, refused. He was convinced the jury would side with the son against a vindictive father. I put on a simple gray suit and combed my hair neatly. Martin had told me, you need to look vulnerable, but firm. You're not a victim, You're a survivor. The courtroom was cold, lit by fluorescent lights that gleamed off the polished floors. I sat at the prosecution table, my hands clasped. Diego was on the other side with Brenda and his lawyer, Ricardo Chen, a slick operator specializing in financial crimes. When our eyes met, I saw something I hadn't expected. Genuine fear, good. Finally, he understood the gravity of the situation. The prosecutor, a woman with a no-nonsense demeanor named Andrea Rios, presented a compelling case. Bank records of unauthorized transfers, testimony from the title company regarding a fraudulent power of attorney, handwriting analysis confirming forged signatures. The Hernandez family testified about the active lease agreement and the chaos that had nearly cost them their home. The defense strategy was clear. Portray me as a confused, aggrieved old man who had changed his mind about helping his son. Chen stood for his opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a case about a family misunderstanding and belated regret. Ernesto Morales gave his son, Diego, access to his accounts and the authority to manage his assets. Why? Because he is 62 years old. He lives alone and needed assistance. Diego did not defraud his father. He acted with his consent. But now, influenced by third parties and due to age-related confusion, Mr. Morales has rewritten history and casts himself as a victim. I felt my blood boil, but I kept my face impassive. The trial proceeded with methodical calm. Andrea called witnesses one by one, building her case brick by brick. A bank teller testified that I had called her as soon as I discovered the missing money, crying and disoriented. The title company representative explained the breach in documentation. A graphologist showed that my signature on the supposed power of attorney did not match my usual signature. It was shaky, uncertain, characteristic of someone signing under heavy medication or without full awareness. Then it was my turn. I stepped onto the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Andrea guided my testimony, firm and gentle. I spoke of my relationship with Diego, of my pride in raising him alone, of my devastation when I discovered his betrayal. Mr. Morales, Andrea asked, did you give Diego permission to withdraw $17,000 from your savings account? No, I replied clearly. Never. Did you authorize him to sell your rental property? No. That property generates income that supplements my pension. I would never have authorized its sale. Did you sign a power of attorney giving Diego control of your finances? Unknowingly. I was hospitalized with severe pneumonia. I had a very high fever. Diego brought some papers and said they were for insurance. I barely remember those days. Chen questioned me aggressively, trying to paint me as spiteful and confused, but I was prepared. Is it true, Mr. Morales, that you do not approve of Diego's relationship with Brenda? He asked. No, I don't approve of having my entire life stolen from me. You had arguments about his relationship, didn't you? Like any family, but this trial is not about who my son loves, but about financial crimes. You live alone, don't you, with no close relatives other than Diego? I live alone, yes. That doesn't make me a liar, nor does it make me a vengeful man. Chen tried various approaches, but nothing worked. The truth was on my side. Then it was Diego's turn. Chen walked him through his version of events, how he worried about me, how I had supposedly asked him to manage my finances, how I was, he claimed, happy to help with the wedding. His performance was polished and convincing. Then Andrea stood for cross-examination, and it all began to unravel. Mr. Morales, you said your father asked you to help manage his money. When exactly did he make this request? It was something we had been discussing for months, he stammered. Can you provide any text message, email, or note confirming this request? It was verbal. I see. Regarding the power of attorney, you said your father signed it voluntarily at the hospital. However, the notary public whose seal appears on the document was in California that day, and the hospital was in Texas. How could this notary have witnessed the signature? Diego paled. I don't know. There must be a mistake in the records. A mistake? Andrea raised an eyebrow. Or you forged the notarization after obtaining your father's signature deceptively. I didn't forge anything. Let's talk about the sale of the Los Robles Street property, she continued. Did you inform the buyers about the active lease agreement with the Hernandez family? I thought they knew. By divine inspiration? Andrea asked coolly. You presented yourself as the owner with full authority to sell. You didn't deem it your obligation to disclose the presence of tenants with a valid lease. Diego began to contradict himself, stutter, repeat himself. The jury watched as his well-rehearsed narrative crumbled. Is it true, Mr. Morales, Andrea concluded, that you knew perfectly well what you were doing? You forged documents, sold property that wasn't yours, emptied your father's account, and did it for one reason, to finance your wedding and your new life. Isn't that so? No, I just wanted to help him. He wanted to be robbed, didn't he? He wanted to be left without savings and without a home. The judge sustained Chen's objection to the leading question, but the damage was done. The jury had seen Diego lose his composure, seen him lie even to himself out loud. When closing arguments concluded, I felt a strange calm. My part was done. I had told the truth, presented the evidence, and stood firm against manipulation. What happened next was no longer in my hands. We stood as the jury retired for deliberation. Before leaving, Diego looked at me one last time. His eyes, always full of confidence, were now empty and scared. I met his gaze unblinking. This was the son I had raised, and this was the judgment he had earned. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, their faces were somber but resolute. On the charge of grand theft, what is your verdict regarding the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of fraud, what is your verdict regarding the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of forgery, what is your verdict regarding the defendant? Guilty. Diego's face collapsed. Brenda let out a choked sob. I sat very still, the weight of those words echoing through the room. Guilty. The judge set the sentencing date for 2 weeks later. Diego was released on bail, but the reality had set in. He was going to prison. Reporters waited outside. Martin had warned me the case had attracted local attention. Elderly father sues own son for theft. Mr. Morales, how do you feel after the verdict? A journalist asked. I stopped and answered clearly. I feel that justice has been served. What my son did was a crime. He betrayed the person who loved him most, and he must face the consequences. What would you say to other families suffering financial elder abuse? Yes, you are not obligated to protect those who harm you, even if it's family, especially if it's family. To love without limits and without consequence is not love. It is enabling abuse. The sentencing hearing proved to be even more harrowing. Judge Gabriela Mendez listened to the impact statements from both parties. The Hernandez family conveyed their fear of losing their home. The home's purchasers detailed a financial catastrophe that nearly ruined them. I spoke of betrayal, humiliation, and the deep wound of witnessing my son turn into a thief. Afterward, Diego's attorney pleaded for leniency. Diego, in tears, then addressed the judge. Your Honor, I know I cannot undo what I have done. I betrayed my father, a man who sacrificed everything for me. I allowed greed and foolishness to destroy our relationship. I understand I must be punished. I only ask for mercy, for a chance to start anew and someday make amends for my actions. The judge regarded him for a long moment. Mr. Morales, she finally stated, you didn't just make a mistake. You made a series of deliberate decisions. You forged documents, exploited your father's illness, and defrauded several individuals. These were not impulsive crimes or acts of desperation, but rather offenses driven by a sense of entitlement and avarice. She paused. You showed no remorse until you were caught. You threatened your father when he sought justice. You do not deserve leniency. She sentenced him to 7 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 4 years. Furthermore, he was ordered to pay full restitution to myself and the purchasers, along with court costs and fines. The total amount exceeded $200,000. Diego collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Brenda stood frozen, her face contorted. As the bailiff led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time, and I met his gaze in silence. There was nothing more to say. A few days later, Martin and I met to discuss the restitution order. "The court has frozen Diego and Brenda's assets," he explained. "The apartment they purchased will be sold. Their accounts will be seized. They will be paying you for years, perhaps even decades." "And Brenda?" I inquired. "She wasn't criminally charged because Diego signed and executed everything, but as his wife, she bears civil liability for the restitution. Her wages can be garnished, her accounts frozen, any property in her name can be seized." I thought of the woman who called me an old egoist, who spoke of grandchildren as if they were bargaining chips. It seemed justice had plans for her too. Over time, the consequences snowballed. Diego lost his job in the finance sector. No company wanted to associate with a convicted fraudster. Brenda scrubbed her social media, once filled with wedding photos and motivational quotes. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves. The apartment was sold at a loss through a foreclosure. I received my first restitution payment, $8,000 from that sale. It would take years to recover everything, but the system worked. The Hernandez family sent me a card. "Thank you for your courage in standing up for justice. You saved our home and taught our children a lesson about what is right." Patricia organized a dinner to celebrate the conclusion of the proceedings. Our book club raised a toast to my strength, my resilience, my resolve not to be trampled. "You accomplished something remarkable, Ernesto," Miguel said. "Most would have given up, but you persevered." "I had no choice," I replied. "He left me none." Yet, as we clinked glasses, I felt an emptiness in my chest. I had won in court, but I had lost my son. The boy I once fitted with a new backpack for school no longer existed. He had been replaced by a man who valued money more than his own father. However, I still had something I wasn't willing to relinquish: my self-respect, my home, my future. 6 months after the sentencing, my life blossomed in ways I could not have imagined. I started a small consulting project, helping seniors protect themselves from financial exploitation. Patricia joined me, and we began holding workshops in community centers and churches. Every person we helped gave meaning to my pain. My wound found its purpose. I traveled to Ireland and Canada, visited old friends, and for my 63rd birthday, Patricia threw me a surprise party. Seeing the smiling faces around me, I realized Diego had been wrong. I wasn't alone. I had community, purpose, and genuine happiness. Meanwhile, Diego's world crumbled. Prison was brutal. He was beaten a couple of times. He developed depression and anxiety attacks. Brenda filed for divorce 8 months later, portraying herself as another victim. She moved back in with her parents and worked 2 retail jobs to pay her share of the restitution. Her social media vanished. No one wanted to be associated with a woman who had fleeced an elderly man. Diego's finance career was decimated. He lost his license and his former company sued him. When he applied for parole, he was denied. Without a job, without references, without proof of genuine rehabilitation, he would serve his full 7 years. I chose to care for myself, and paradoxically, that decision led me to the most prosperous period of my life. Looking back, I understand what happened. I loved him so much, so unconditionally, that I forgot to teach him to love me back. I gave without limits, sacrificed without measure, and in doing so, I raised a man who believed he was entitled to take whatever he desired. The greatest lesson I learned: love without respect is worthless, and a family of disorder is merely a shared surname. My son is in prison because he committed a crime, not because I am vindictive. He chose avarice over love. I did not ruin his life. He did that himself. The only thing I did was refuse to join him in that destruction. And now, I want to ask you, my listener, what would you do if your son betrayed you in such a way? Would you have the strength to choose justice over guilt? Thank you for listening to my story until the end. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and leave a comment telling me which city you are watching from. Perhaps your message will help someone else set boundaries and remember that protecting yourself is not selfish. It is survival. Yes,